Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, we are going to create this shadow box card using the March 2020 My Monthly Hero Kit. We're going to start today's card by starting to make our shadow box. I have two A2 panels here that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so your standard A2 size. And then I have another panel here that's slightly smaller, it's 4 1/4 by 5. And these panels were created out of Hero Arts Dove White cardstock, which is a good heavyweight cardstock, 110. You want to use a heavyweight cardstock to build your shadow box. This is the sketch I created to help me figure out my dimensions and where I'm going to score on my pieces so I can construct my box. I thought this was helpful to share so you had something to refer to when you were making your own card. You can kind of pause the screen and refer back to that whenever you need to. So I am now going to start scoring these panels. I have my A2 panel here, or one of my A2 panels, and I am scoring at 1/2 and at 4 1/2. And I'm going to repeat that for actually all these panels, so even the smaller ones. So this is the second A2 panel. Again, I'm scoring at 1/2 and at 4 1/2, which means basically I have a one side that's a 1/2 inch and one side that's 1 inch tab. And then for the smaller piece, it's just going to be 2 1/2 inch tabs on this smaller panel. Now that all my panels are scored, I'm now going to move on to creating the window for my shadow box. I have one of the A2 panels here, and I'm just going to fold my tabs over so the score line is nice and creased and very visual. And now I have a piece of acetate, and I'm just using this to help me trace my window. The acetate has a nice 90-degree corner, which makes creating this window really easy. I'm trying to keep about 1/4 of an inch from the edge and the score line to kind of make my square opening for my my window. I'm going to now cut out my window with a ruler and a craft knife. You could definitely just use a square die if you'd rather, instead of cutting it out by hand. Both would work. I just wanted to show you, if you don't have any square dies, how you can still make this a shadow box without them. So now that I've cut out my opening, I'm now just going to erase my pencil line with my eraser and move on to showing you guys kind of how this comes together. So I have both of my A2 panels here, one that I cut the window out of and my other one. I've creased both of them on their score lines, and you can see how this kind of goes together. The 1 inch tabs are opposite of each other, as well as the 1/2 inch tabs are opposite of each other. Now I'm turning this over so you can see that I'm going to add score tape to both of the 1/2 inch tabs. That's all you need to add score tape to. I'm actually not using score tape though, because I ran out. I just have a piece of I cut a strip of double-sided adhesive sheet down to about a little bit less than 1/2, and I'm now attaching it to the 1/2 inch tabs on both of my A2 panels. Now we're going to move on to stamping some of our elements for our shadow box. We're going to start with the landscape here, and I'm actually going to stamp this twice. So I have a kind of a large scrap of white cardstock here, and I'm going to start by inking the first layer with Green Hills. This ink is included with the kit, which is just awesome. So I just stamped that, then I flipped my panel over, and now I'm going to stamp this first layer a second time. Like I mentioned, I'm going to have 2 landscapes, so I need to stamp it twice. So now I'm moving on to the second layer for this landscape, and I'm going to ink this up in Field of Greens. Again, this ink is included in the March kit, and I'm just going to stamp that, then flip my panel over and stamp the other landscape with the second layer. Now that my landscapes are stamped, I'm going to die cut them out. I have the matching die for them. I'm just going to line it up and then grab a couple pieces of purple tape, hold it in place, and run it through. I went ahead and die cut both of my landscapes off camera, and now you can see here that the die doesn't cut off a bottom, so I'm just going to trim that little bit of cardstock remaining here so that the landscapes are free from the panel. Now I'm going to move on to stamping my treetops. I'm going to ink up the first layer in Cotton Candy. Again, this ink is included in the kit, so that's really awesome. And I'm also going to stamp 2 treetops because I'm going to have 2 trees as well. After I stamped that first layer, I'm now moving on to the second layer, and I'm going to ink up this layer with Rose Madder, again included in the kit. And I'm going to stamp that bottom one and then rotate and stamp it once again. What I love about this tree is that you really could pick whatever colors you want. It just looks great no matter what colors you pair it up with. I now have the trunk here. There's only 1 layer for the trunk. I first inked it up in caramel and stamped it, and then I'm going to grab cup of joe and partially ink, so just angle my ink pad so it only touches a part of the stamp and just kind of ink up the bottom portion, the very tip top of the branches. This just adds a little bit more interest to that trunk, and I think it just creates a nice gradation. I'm going to repeat that for the second trunk, again inking up with caramel, stamping it, and then partial inking with cup of joe just to kind of create a nice little gradation on the trunk and add some visual interest. I went ahead and die cut the treetops and the trunks out with the matching dies off camera. I also trimmed down our landscapes to be 4 inches wide, and as you can see here, this second landscape I did trim down so it's a lot shorter. It's only about 3/4 of an inch tall. I'm going to layer these on top of each other so it has a dimensional look, and I want that front one to be shorter. I'm now going to adhere the trunks onto the treetops, just going to add a little bit of liquid glue to the top branches and stick those down, and then I'll set those aside. I'm now going to move on to figuring out where I want the placement to go on the landscape and of the tree. So I grabbed my window panel here and I'm just positioning that landscape where I want it to go and holding that tree just to kind of figure out where everything needs to be. Now that I've figured out how right I want that tree to be, I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the tree trunk, stick that down, and I've decided I needed to move it just a tiny bit over to the right because I definitely want to make sure there's enough room on that left side so you can stamp a sentiment and be visible. I'm now going to trim off any of that excess of the tree. Again, this tree and landscape can't be any wider than 4 inches to fit inside of our shadow box, so you definitely have to be mindful of that. I now have our middle or our inside panel. This is the smaller panel, so it's 4 1/4 by 5, and I'm just positioning my landscape here and then tracing with my pencil right above it. After I've traced it, I'm going to grab my scissors here and just cut just below that pencil line. This does not have to be an absolutely perfect, like fussy cut. It just needs to be, I just think it looks good if it kind of follows similarly to where your landscape line is going to be. And as you can see here, I hold it to the camera. It's not a perfect cut. I cut just below that pencil line. Now that it's cut, I'm going to adhere it directly on to that panel. And I did want to point out that I did crease the score lines that I made, but one, the tabs is kind of folded towards me and one is folded back. That just makes sure it kind of fits better or kind of stands up better inside of our shadow box. I'm now going to add some of my double-sided adhesive to the outside of both of those 1/2 inch tabs, and once I've added that adhesive, I can actually remove the backing and start to put this together. When putting your shadow box together, I do recommend that you start with the inside piece and connect it to your windowed piece. As you can see here, the tab from the inside piece connects to the 1 inch tab for the window piece. After I've got that inside piece connected to our front piece, our windowed piece, I'm now going to remove the backing on both of the remaining 1/2 inch tabs on the front and the inside piece, and I'm just going to carefully kind of move in place the back panel. They're both going to attach to the 1 inch tab on the back panel, and once I get both of those in place, I'll then remove the backing on that 1/2 inch tab on the back panel and just connect that to the 1 inch tab of the front panel. And that actually completes kind of the bones or the whole structure for our shadow box. Now we're just going to kind of embellish a little bit. I'm going to start with my little landscape layer. I'm going to add some liquid glue to the sides as well as at the very bottom of our little landscape. Once I get the glue in place, I'm then going to slide the landscape into the just behind the front frame here. Actually connects right to it, and then I'm going to grab the tree and place this onto the front of the frame. I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the trunk as well as a little bit of glue onto the frame itself, and then stick that tree down. It's okay for this tree to overhang here on the left because when this collapses down, we're actually going to see a little bit of the side there of the shadow box, and it's still all going to fit within our A2 envelope. I have a panel here of mist cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 4, and I placed it inside my shadow box, and then I popped in my sentiment, just trying to figure out get the positioning right. Once I got that positioning right, I then carefully slid out the panel and then carefully placed it in my Misty. I'm now picked up the stamp and I'm going to stamp it here in Intens-ified Black ink. And once I've got that stamped, I'm almost done with this card. I'm going to add some glue to the back side of that panel and then just slide it and adhere it directly to the background or the back panel. And once I have that panel in place, this card is done. I'll now hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at this shadow box card. As you can see, it folds down to be basically flat, and it will fit inside your A2 envelope. So this is a great card for mailing. And then when it pops up, you get so much dimension, basically an inch worth of dimension. And this cute little landscape was so easy to create with the March kit. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you want any more information on the products I use, please head over to Hero Arts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.